Welcome to the Tranny Support Unit's Jumbana podcast series, where we explore the stories, insights, and culture that shape our working world. I'm your host, Jaimee Carpenter. I'm a Darug woman living and working on beautiful Yuin country. I'd like to start by acknowledging the rich cultural heritage and ongoing connections of Aboriginal people to the lands and waters across New South Wales. I recognise their continuous connection to country, culture, and community, and honour the history and traditions that have been woven into the fabric of this land for thousands of generations. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jaimee Hamilton. Jaimee has been a lecturer for over 20 years and has a wealth of knowledge around Aboriginal social theory, education, philosophy, pathways education, and ethical use of AI. Jaimee's always looking for more engaging ways to improve the student experience. She is fiercely passionate about Aboriginal people gaining equitable access to universal design for learning and education. Jaimee is currently working as a lecturer and subject coordinator at James Cook University. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jaimee.
Thank you, Jaimee.
Can you share with me some of your personal journey and what inspired you to advocate for Aboriginal inclusive spaces?
Sure. So I'd just like to say I'm a Ngunnawal woman from the ancestral lands of Canberra, and I'm currently sitting in Cairns at the moment. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the elders past, present, and emerging on the country I stand on, and I'd also like to acknowledge my own elders, past, present, and emerging. So what inspired me was my university experience. Yeah, so we just weren't present, and I fell. Let's be honest, I fell into doing honors. I fell into doing a PhD, and then I became an academic. And then I was like, no, I'm not okay with any of this at all. I'm going to fight really hard to make a space for Aboriginal students to feel like they're included.
Yeah. And did you notice any kind of transition from that time when you were studying to kind of now where you're now teaching and you're supporting and encouraging students to learn about their own cultural practices and creating some spaces where people feel culturally okay?
Yeah, because I've created a safe space. I tell my students, I am teaching you using Aboriginal pedagogy. I am using Aboriginal theory. I'm teaching you in this way because that is how we learn. That's how we have been socialized. And what I've noticed is our Aboriginal students and Torres Strait Islander students are starting to open up more and more about their Aboriginality there and being Indigenous and using it in their assessment tasks of what drives them to be where they want to be. Whereas traditionally, that would not have happened when I was at university.
Wow. Okay. So what does an Aboriginal inclusive space mean to you?
For me, straight up, I want to preface that if you are a non-Indigenous person, I find that there are three things that you need before you even enter into a space is empathy, empowerment, and respect. So we need to be able to empathy, empowerment, and knowledge. Sorry, empathy, empowerment, and knowledge. So the empowerment is you need to empower yourself to be able to have the confidence to be able to create inclusive spaces. So that doesn't mean speaking on behalf of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That means speaking about. So you can speak about our culture and you can teach our culture and you can do all those things, but you absolutely cannot speak on behalf of us.
Yeah, absolutely. How do non-Indigenous people get that empowerment? Because I imagine it's an interesting concept that's kind of different from historical decisions on how to teach and how to learn. So how do we learn that? How do we empower ourselves to create these culturally inclusive spaces?
I developed this subject at CDU, but here at James Cook, I'm now teaching it. I teach something called cultural intelligence for professionals, and it's all about teaching people how to create culturally inclusive spaces. So the first thing, the first module, which is their ways of knowing, where they learn the foundational theoretical concepts, is they have to know themselves. You have to understand that you have a culture. If you cannot understand your own cultural self awareness, there is no possible way you can understand somebody else's, and there's no possible way you can create a culturally inclusive space. So you have to be, yeah, sorry.
No, I was going to say, because culture is such a big thing, and I think that people misconstrue the kind of meaning of culture. So, we were talking the other day a little bit about the different types of culture that people can have in their space and where they live. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like, how does
Yep.
culture fit for people? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I'm teaching my students, and I've just actually finished teaching module 1, is culture is what makes you up. It's not just ethnicity. So many of my students will go, "Oh, I'm white Australian, I don't have culture." Well, you don't exist. If you don't have culture, you don't exist. So we start unpacking it. So what do you enjoy? So sometimes you may be a surfer. So you're part of the surfing culture. Your family might be part of your culture. Food might be part of your culture. I'm teaching postgraduate students at the moment this same stuff, and that coffee is a big thing that's coming up in their culture. So whatever makes you up and you value and you cherish within your life, that is your cultural self. We are multicultural, multidimensional beings. We don't just belong to one culture. Like you and I, you've got your own family culture, you've got your work culture, you've got your community culture, you've got tattooing culture, all the other things that you're interested in, that all makes up your cultural being.
And I've never really thought about it like that. I guess there's always been that perspective that, as an Aboriginal woman, that my culture consists of my history and my ancestors and my cultural knowledge based around my ethnicity. But I've never looked at the bigger picture where, my culture is also about the places that I work, the people that I connect with, the way that I relate to people, going for a coffee every Wednesday or, running in a drumming group or, that's all encompassing of culture. And it's an interesting concept because I've never ever considered that before.
And I think that's where we've all stumbled a lot, is that we equate culture to ethnicity. So that's why we can't have true cultural inclusiveness, because people are sitting there going, I don't have a culture because I'm not Aboriginal, or I'm not Greek, or I'm not Chinese, or do you know what? I don't have all these traditional practices. Well, you actually do. You just have different traditional practices. And who am I to tell you what your culture is? I'm nobody. Another thing that my students really struggle with, but it's really important, is that you behave differently within your cultural self depending on, it's situational. So we unpack, your culture, your knowledge, your experience, and your behavior, and you can't have any of those things without the other. So your work culture is completely different to your home culture, and your cultural self at work is different to your cultural self when you're with your grandparents.
That's really interesting. So how do we then, like what kind of strengths do we need to bring in those cultural practices to kind of create inclusive, well, ultimately, what does inclusive environments mean?
So for me, I want to make this perfectly clear. So two things I want to make clear is, a culturally inclusive space is not free of conflict. It can have conflict. It's just how we manage and deal with conflict and cross-cultural communication, which is a big thing that I teach as well. The other thing that I want to make perfectly clear is a culturally inclusive space is not a flag on a wall. It is far beyond symbolic things. Sure, they can help all of this, but do you know what a culturally inclusive space is? It's a feeling. Do I feel valued? Do I feel safe? Do I feel included? And do I feel like I'm valued within this space? That's what a culturally inclusive space looks like for me. And that's what I teach my students. And it's a really hard thing for them to be able to grapple with, because, oh, we've got Aboriginal books in the library. Great. But the Aboriginal person that's walked in feels isolated and not included, and, like, I just don't belong here. So how do we fix that?
Yeah, I really love that because historically there's been that idea of, if you add some cool artwork or you bring in some nice furniture or, you have some cool cultural music playing in the background, people will feel connected. It might assist the process, but it's not going to give that feeling of being culturally inclusive in terms of a space.
Absolutely.
How do we do that then? How do we kind of establish a way that we can get people coming into our services to actually feel culturally included? How do we do that?
Cultural intelligence is all about sitting back, watching, and learning the lay of the land. How are people behaving? What are the expectations here? How should I behave? You don't just go in gun ho and go, right, I'm the nurse, I know everything, this is what's going to happen. That's not a relationship. That's a dictatorship. So it's about building relationships. It's about understanding. So a culturally intelligent person is going to expect misunderstandings. They just do. And we understand that, and it's not a point of difference. I teach a lot about stereotyping, and I actually did it yesterday. We did stereotyping. Some stereotyping is absolutely horrendous, and Jaimee, we know we've lived the dream, but other stereotyping is good. So it keeps us safe, and we need to understand and not be scared of these things and know automatically we stereotype to go, okay, so maybe you look like this, and I understand that a little bit of your cultural practice is this. I'm going to sit back and watch and see if that is actually who you are. And wow, it is. So now I know how to go in. But it's about not being a top-down person. It's about being a surface level person and understanding that while I am here to assist, I'm here to do these things, I need to build trust, reciprocity, and respect. If we don't have that with our people, then we don't have anything. There was an early childhood educator, and so she started to unpack culture with her little ones. So they're 3 and 4. And she started talking about culture, like what I taught them, and then everyone has their own culture. And, she did it on a kindy level. I think, no, sorry, preschool, where New South Wales, up
Yes.
here it's kindy. I
Yeah.
can't remember where I am. And a parent came to her 2 days later and said, "Are you talking about culture?" And she said, "Yeah, I am. Why?" And she said, "Because so and so's come home and has now worked out we're Vietnamese and wants to know all about being Vietnamese." Another parent came and said, "Are you talking about culture?" "Yep. My son has come home and told everyone that he's a proud Indigenous man and he's a warrior." So it's just about opening those channels and allowing people to talk and be safe and go, "Hey, actually, my cultural practice is I do this."
And I think it's really tricky thinking of it from a health perspective, which, our audience is kind of targeted at, is that it's different. We always try to say that we like to have an understanding and we like to support people, but, there's still, even though we try not to do that, there's still that superiority where you're the clinician and they're the client. So I think we need to banish that. We need to kind of not look at it as a perspective of that. We're there to provide support, but we're there to walk alongside that person in their journey
Correct.
and their cultural inclusiveness. And that's how we get that connection, is to actually walk alongside, listen to them, be part of their journey so that we can truly understand what they mean and what they want within their support and their environment.
But allow them to understand you as well. It's not just one way. This is one of the reasons how I stumbled upon cultural intelligence and did so much work in it is cultural safety was just so one way. We just have to bumble along and make our way. It's not fair. Like cultural intelligence is inclusive of everybody. And it's about making sure that we are walking beside people and you're sharing as much as you feel comfortable as well. That's what I value. I value reciprocity, trust, and respect. And you're building that with me.
Yeah. So I guess that comes to my next question, which would be, what kind of impacts do you think inclusive spaces have on wellbeing and cultural preservation in Aboriginal communities?
In a word, phenomenal.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a great word to use. I love
yeah,
it.
that's the only word I can use for that. It will have profound impacts. Like you think about a time when you've actually felt valued and heard within the medical profession, and you're like, wow, okay, you actually heard me. You valued what I had to say, and now you're going to work out some way to help me. Because at the end of the day, if I'm in the health services anywhere, I want help. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be excluded. I want to be helped, valued, respected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think that if you can be culturally inclusive and respectful and have reciprocity and build trust, and you can build that quite quickly. Like it doesn't have to be over 18 years. You can build that quite quickly with just being open, friendly, transparent. I'm here to do this. I'm only here for this amount of time. I can only provide this for you. What are your expectations?
Yeah. And I think that that is the key as well, that this, we're not talking about having to build a trust over an extended period of time. Trust
No.
can be built in very small periods of time. You don't need complete and 100% trust in somebody to be able to share and to create that culturally inclusive space. It's gaining that small piece of trust so that you can continue with the work and to walk alongside that person.
Correct. All I need to do is trust that you have my best interests at heart. You really do want to help me, and you don't want to devalue me as a cultural human being because you're also a cultural human being, and I'm not here to devalue you.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you think, like if I'm thinking about our Aboriginal staff now working in AMOS and BSF services, how can we ensure that those Aboriginal voices are heard and respected when it comes to like decision-making processes and changing policies within New South Wales? How can we make sure that that happens?
All we can do is keep trying, keep talking. Actually, one way, do you know how we can do it? By
Mm,
being inclusive ourselves. Let's model what we want. We want you to behave like this, please. Look, I've been knocked down a gazillion times, but I keep getting up, and I've finally got this subject up and running. I've finally got, I've got a consultancy where I'm teaching other people this stuff. I've finally got, but it's not easy. I don't have a definitive answer for that because I'm still trying myself.
yeah. And I think that that's the key though, is that we need to keep trying. I don't
Correct.
think there'll ever be a point where we don't not try. We need to try to get this stuff to happen. And it's a continual process that will just keep going to the end of time.
But the other thing is the thing that gives me so much hope, and the reason why I keep going is I watch my Aboriginal students' faces light up. I watch them succeed. Like I had one student who grew up on community, like rural as you can get in the Cape. And he actually got the highest mark for all of Cairns internal and Townsville for assignment two. And I emailed him because I thought I don't want to tell you in class because I don't want to shame you and all the rest of it. I told him, and the email he sent back to me just made me cry. It was phenomenal. And I didn't realize this human being was about to drop out. So he persevered and he got the highest grade. That's what gives me hope. So if you're in the health industry and you see a little Aboriginal kid that's just beaming, getting, you know, a health service, that's your reward. If you can see an elder that's beaming, getting blah, 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 you see a mother getting help, that's our reward. That's why we keep fighting.
And that's, yeah, I love that. And I think that that's really the special, I think, point with AMOS and BSF services is that we don't only see the mothers, we see the mothers, we see the children, we see the families, we see the elders, the aunties, the uncles, everybody is kind of encapsulated in that. So it's actually a community-based system. It's not just working with one single entity. So being able to be inclusive and supportive of all of those people makes for a really special space to be.
Oh, I agree. And if everyone feels included, imagine that. Grandma feels included. Auntie feels included, blah, blah, blah. And you see that family thriving because of your service. Wow, that's special. And that's something that I feel isn't valued enough is what happens on the ground is look at these shining faces that weren't shining faces before.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do you see the role? I mean, because we're talking about culture and communities now. So, how would you see the role of Aboriginal community knowledge in kind of fostering more inclusive, like a more inclusive society? How can our culture do that?
Just look at us. We're actually quite inclusive people by nature. So a lot of these theories that I'm reading, like universal design for learning, I'm like, us mob have done this from time immemorial. Like this is not new. You're just putting Western words on this. So we've had to sit back and watch, right? It's time for you, mob, to sit back and watch us. Watch how we actually do things. We're not dysfunctional. Do you know what I mean? We're actually quite loving and giving people, and most of us will give the shirt off our back for you. So for me, I think as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander professionals working in a professional setting with non-Indigenous people, I think it's our job to emulate what we want. And that's just me. Other people can disagree, but I think it's time. Let's show them who we are, what we are, and this is what you should be. Do better.
I agree. And that brings it back to that you talking earlier about reciprocity, and it's about, it's about sharing that. And, you're not going to get stuff from people unless you give a little bit of yourself as well. So,
Correct.
we do that in a way that of course, in a culturally inclusive way, but also with our boundaries because we work in health, but you can still create that reciprocity and that
Correct.
support for families and for communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't expect them to give you all their knowledge and walk away and you give them nothing. It's not okay. We've had that done for a very long time. I can show you libraries full of books where our people have given you stuff and you've made careers off it and you've given us nothing back. So as a health professional, you have to give back. If you want that trust, reciprocity, and respect, if you want knowledge, empowerment, and knowledge, no, knowledge, empowerment. Oh, I had it before. But if you empathy, if you want to be able to have knowledge, empathy, and empowerment, then you don't just pick that up off the shelf and inject it in. You have to give and take.
Yeah, which comes to, I guess, another question that I have for you. How can non-Aboriginal people become better allies to support this whole idea of creating culturally inclusive spaces?
Listen,
Yeah,
listen.
absolutely.
Don't tell me what I want. Don't tell me what I need. Don't tell me like, ask, how would you like us to be more inclusive? How do you envision this to happen? What does it look like for you? Like the amount of times I've been told, this is what inclusivity looks like. And I'm like, not for me, it doesn't. Because I'm actually feeling quite isolated and unsafe in this context. So I think it's ask.
It sounds like such an easy thing, but it is so hard for so many people just to sit in that space and listen and learn from others. It's amazing how that is such a tricky thing for people sometimes.
How many times have you sat there and someone's asked you a question like so when you go into a room and they ask you a question and you can just see them chomping at the bit to like, you're trying to answer, you're answering and they're just chomping at the bit to talk over the top of you. And it's like, why did you ask me? You don't actually have engaged, listening, empathetic ears.
And I think the people that working in AMOS and BSF services are in this very unique position where you have Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal staff working together for the same cause. So it's the perfect opportunity to practice all of this stuff, to practice that empathy, that learning, that knowledge sharing, and giving each other space to actually understand where the other person's coming from.
Correct. And expect misunderstandings. And allow and the this is one thing that I was teaching yesterday. I asked them to give me all the words for someone who behaves differently to you. They're all negative words. Why is difference always negative? It's not. A difference is something to celebrate, and every single one of us is different. Every single one of us. We are all the other. So embrace difference, learn from it. That's how you get knowledge, empathy, and empowerment. You learn.
Absolutely.
Allow it
Absolutely.
into your socialization process.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so how do you think that organisations can kind of ensure that they're generally inclusive of Aboriginal perspectives? Because we've talked about that ticking boxes and, how do we actually avoid that? How do we make sure that people are genuinely inclusive of Aboriginal perspectives in their services?
For me, that's where I find my joy. It is that I have so many lecturers who are around me that now teach exactly the same way I do because they have adopted Aboriginal pedagogies. I have so many lecturers that I've taught yarning circles to that all now do it and they are getting phenomenal results. So I
Yeah,
get the joy where, other lecturers are doing it, their students are finding joy because all these lecturers say, this was designed by an Aboriginal academic that works here, blah, blah, blah. I'm teaching you using Aboriginal pedagogy. Straight away, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students beam up. Wow, I'm present in the classroom.
and I think that that's a really important thing too, that you mentioned it earlier, that, non-Indigenous people can absolutely teach Aboriginal education. They can't teach our feeling, our experience, but they can certainly teach the content.
Correct. Just don't speak on my behalf. Don't tell me what I need. Walk beside me. Stop walking above me or ahead of me and deciding what I need and what's best for my family.
Yeah. And that
Ask
fits
me.
perfectly with a health culture, is working
Yeah.
with, same as from your education perspective, it's exactly the same as a health perspective. It's about listening, walking alongside, follow me on the journey.
Yep.
Don't tell me where to go.
Ask me.
Yeah. Okay. So we're coming to the end. So tell me, what's a
Wow.
key? I know. What do you think is a key thing for us to remember, like a keynote thing before we finish off from today? What would you like people out here to know about creating inclusive spaces?
Expect difference. Allow for people to have space. Trust, reciprocity, respect, empowerment, knowledge, and empathy. They are the 6 things you need in order to create culturally inclusive spaces.
Thank you so much, Jaimee. We really appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank you for tuning in today. I hope the information you gleaned from the podcast helped to support your work with Aboriginal families and communities.